Good morning and welcome to the Daily Signal. I'm your host, Remo, and this is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. Today, we're covering stories that span from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, touching on everything from international diplomacy to domestic policy changes. We'll start with developing news from Austria, where a tragic school shooting has left at least 9 people dead, then move to the ongoing conflicts shaping global politics. From Ukraine's latest appeals to America to new developments in the Middle East involving Israel, Gaza, and Yemen. We'll also explore how political dynamics are shifting across Europe, examine changes to U.S. immigration policies under the new administration, and look at rising tensions in the Pacific as Japan reports a significant Chinese naval presence. These aren't just headlines, these are stories that affect real people, real communities, and they're shaping the world we all live in. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive into today's news. We begin today with breaking news from Austria, where a devastating school shooting has claimed at least 9 lives. According to Reuters and local officials, the attack occurred at a school in Austria, with the mayor confirming the tragic death toll. Details are still emerging, but this marks another horrific addition to the global concern about school safety. For families in Austria today, this represents an unimaginable tragedy. Parents receiving the worst possible phone call, and a community trying to comprehend how their safe space became a scene of violence. School shootings, while more commonly reported in the United States, remind us that no community anywhere is immune to such acts of violence. Austrian authorities are still investigating the circumstances, including the identity of the shooter and any possible motives. This story will undoubtedly reignite discussions about school security measures, mental health resources, and gun access policies, not just in Austria, but across Europe, where such incidents, while rare, deeply shock communities unprepared for such violence. Our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and the entire Austrian community grappling with this senseless loss. From Austria, we turn to Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelensky is once again calling for increased American action following the latest wave of Russian drone and missile attacks. According to ABC News, Zelensky's demands come as Ukraine continues to face relentless bombardment from Russian forces. This appeal highlights a critical moment in the ongoing conflict that's now in its 4th year. For Zelensky, these aren't just diplomatic requests. They represent the difference between life and death for Ukrainian civilians who face nightly attacks on their homes, schools, and hospitals. The timing is particularly significant given the current U.S. political climate and ongoing debates about foreign aid. Zelensky's demands for action from America suggest growing urgency as Ukraine potentially faces a challenging period ahead, especially with changing dynamics in Washington. For everyday Ukrainians, this means another night of air raid sirens, another morning of checking which buildings still stand, and another day of wondering when or if the international support will be enough to end this conflict. The question facing American policymakers is no longer whether to support Ukraine, but how much and in what form, a debate that directly impacts both Ukrainian survival and America's role in global security. Environmental activist Greta Thunberg made headlines again today, this time departing Israel on a flight to Paris after being detained aboard an aid ship, according to CNN reports. The 22-year-old climate activist's presence on an aid vessel highlights the intersection of environmental activism and humanitarian concerns. Thunberg's detention underscores the complex nature of international waters, humanitarian aid, and diplomatic tensions. While details about the specific circumstances remain limited, her involvement suggests the aid ship was likely attempting to deliver supplies to Palestinian territories, a mission that often encounters legal and political obstacles. For Thunberg, this represents an expansion of her activism beyond climate change into broader humanitarian issues. Her global platform, built on environmental advocacy, now amplifies other causes she considers urgent moral imperatives. The incident also reflects the challenging nature of humanitarian aid delivery in conflict zones, where even well-intentioned efforts can become entangled in legal complications and political tensions. As Thunberg heads to Paris, This episode will likely fuel further discussions about the role of international activists in Middle Eastern conflicts and the complex legal frameworks governing aid delivery in disputed territories. Speaking of Middle Eastern tensions, the conflict has taken a significant escalation, with Israeli naval forces attacking the rebel-held Yemeni port city of Hodeidah, marking the first such strike in this expanding conflict, according to the Associated Press. This attack represents a major expansion of Israeli military operations beyond its immediate neighbors. Hodeidah is controlled by Houthi rebels who have been launching attacks on international shipping lanes in the Red Sea, claiming solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. For the estimated 600,000 residents of Hodeidah, this Israeli strike brings a distant conflict directly to their doorstep. The port city is crucial for Yemen's already struggling economy and serves as a vital entry point for humanitarian aid to a country facing one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. This escalation signals how the Gaza conflict continues to ripple across the Middle East, drawing in actors from Iran to Yemen to Israel. The Houthis' attacks on international shipping have disrupted global trade routes, affecting everything from oil prices to consumer goods worldwide. The strike on Hodeidah also raises questions about the future scope of regional conflicts and whether we're seeing the beginning of a broader Middle Eastern war that could have global economic and security implications. Staying in the region, the New York Times reports that a human rights group is now accusing Hamas of threatening aid workers in Gaza. This allegation adds another layer of complexity to an already desperate humanitarian situation where international organizations are trying to deliver life-saving assistance. For aid workers, these alleged threats create an impossible situation. They're trying to help Palestinian civilians who desperately need food, medical supplies, and shelter, but they're reportedly facing intimidation from the very forces that claim to represent those people. This story highlights one of the most challenging aspects of humanitarian work in conflict zones, navigating between hostile forces while trying to maintain neutrality and focus on civilian need. Aid organizations often find themselves caught between government restrictions, militant group demands, and the urgent needs of innocent people. For the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, these alleged threats against aid workers could mean even less assistance reaching those who need it most. When humanitarian organizations can't operate safely, it's ordinary families, children, elderly people, and the sick who suffer the most. The allegations also raise broader questions about accountability and the protection of humanitarian workers in conflict zones worldwide, an issue that affects crisis response from Ukraine to Sudan to Afghanistan. Shifting to European politics, Italy's governing coalition led by Giorgia Meloni is reportedly celebrating from the beach as low voter turnout effectively killed a referendum pushed by left-wing opponents, according to Politico Europe. This might sound like typical political theater, but it actually reveals important dynamics about European democracy. Referendums require minimum turnout levels to be valid, and when citizens don't participate, it often benefits the status quo, in this case, Meloni's right-wing government. The image of coalition politicians taunting from the beach captures something significant about modern European politics: the growing disconnect between political classes and ordinary citizens. When major political questions are decided by low turnout rather than active engagement, it raises questions about democratic legitimacy. For Italian voters, this outcome might reflect political fatigue, dissatisfaction with available options, or simply summer vacation priorities. But for European observers, Italy's political stability matters enormously, as the EU's third-largest economy and a key player in Mediterranean migration issues. Meloni's coalition's celebration highlights their growing confidence, but also the fragmentation of Italy's left-wing opposition, which couldn't mobilize enough voters even for their own referendum initiative. Across the English Channel, the BBC reports that Britain's Labour government is hoping to put a controversial winter fuel policy misstep behind them. This refers to their decision to restrict winter heating allowances for pensioners, which sparked significant public backlash. For millions of British seniors, this policy change isn't just political debate. It's about whether they can afford to heat their homes during cold winter months. The winter fuel allowance has been a lifeline for elderly people on fixed incomes, helping them pay heating bills that can consume a significant portion of their monthly budget. Labor's challenge illustrates a common dilemma facing governments worldwide: how to balance fiscal responsibility with social support, especially when public budgets are strained. The party that traditionally champions social welfare found itself cutting benefits for some of society's most vulnerable members. The political misstep language suggests Labor recognizes the damage this policy has done to their reputation as defenders of working class and elderly interests. For a party that spent years criticizing conservative austerity measures, implementing their own cuts has created credibility challenges. This story reflects broader tensions across developed countries about maintaining social safety nets while managing government finances in an era of aging populations and economic uncertainty. Turning to U.S. immigration policy, PBS News reports that as a new travel ban takes effect under the current administration, some international visitors are experiencing increased scrutiny at American airports. This represents a significant shift in how America welcomes or doesn't welcome international travelers. For families planning to visit relatives in America, students hoping to study at U.S. universities, or business travelers, this increased scrutiny means longer waits, more intrusive questioning, and greater uncertainty about whether they'll be admitted to the country. Airport experiences often serve as visitors' first impression of a country, and increased scrutiny can send powerful messages about America's openness to the world. These policies affect not just individual travelers, but America's reputation as a destination for tourism, education, and business investment. The implementation of stricter screening procedures also impacts airport operations, potentially creating longer lines and delays that affect both international and domestic travelers. Immigration officers must balance security concerns with the practical realities of processing thousands of travelers daily. This policy shift reflects ongoing American debates about immigration, security, and national identity, debates that have real-world consequences for millions of people who want to visit, work, or study in the United States. In Washington political news, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth faces Congress for the first time since controversial signal message leaks and the deployment of Marines to Los Angeles, according to the Associated Press. This hearing comes at a critical moment for the Pentagon leadership. The signal leaks reportedly contained concerning communications that raised questions about Hegseth's judgment and leadership style. For a defense secretary, personal communications can quickly become matters of national security interest, especially when they reveal decision-making processes or personal views that might affect military operations. The Marine deployment to Los Angeles, likely related to civil unrest or security concerns, also places Hegseth in the spotlight regarding domestic use of military personnel, always a sensitive constitutional and political issue in American democracy. For military families and service members, leadership stability at the Pentagon matters enormously. Defense secretaries make decisions about deployments, military budgets, and strategic priorities that directly affect military personnel and their families worldwide. This congressional appearance will likely focus on both accountability for past actions and future leadership of America's military during a time of global tensions from Ukraine to the Pacific to the Middle East. Finally, we end today with news from the Pacific, where Japan has reported sighting 2 Chinese aircraft carriers in the Pacific for the first time, according to Reuters. This represents a significant escalation in regional military tensions and demonstrates China's growing naval capabilities. For Japan, this sighting represents both a military concern and a diplomatic challenge. Aircraft carriers project power far beyond a nation's borders, and their presence in Pacific waters, traditionally patrolled by U.S. and allied forces, signals China's intention to challenge existing military balances. The timing is particularly significant given ongoing tensions over Taiwan, disputed islands, and trade relationships. For Japanese citizens, especially those in southern islands closer to Taiwan, these developments raise questions about regional security and Japan's military preparedness. This naval development also affects U.S. strategic planning, as American forces maintain significant presence in the Pacific and have security commitments to both Japan and Taiwan. The sight of Chinese carriers operating in Pacific waters represents exactly the kind of challenge U.S. military planners have been preparing for. For the global economy, Pacific tensions matter enormously. These waters carry much of the world's trade, and any military conflict could disrupt supply chains, affecting everything from electronics to automobiles worldwide. As we wrap up today's news, several themes emerge from these 10 stories that connect our global community. We're seeing conflicts expand beyond their original boundaries, from Gaza affecting Yemen to Pacific tensions involving multiple nations, to European political dynamics affecting international relationships. We're also witnessing the ongoing struggle between security concerns and humanitarian needs, whether that's aid workers facing threats in Gaza, increased airport screening in America, or communities trying to help each other while navigating political and military pressures. Perhaps most importantly, these stories remind us that political decisions made in capitals around the world have real impacts on ordinary people. Austrian families grieving, Ukrainian civilians under attack, British seniors worried about heating bills, and travelers facing new restrictions. Tomorrow, we'll continue following these developing stories and bring you the latest news from around the world. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that understanding our world helps us navigate it better. This has been the Daily Signal. I'm Remo. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.